Hello and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. As we roll into December, it's his turn.
Hey, Jim.
State Representative Paul Schmid from Westport joining us in here as the year comes to an end, and a busy year it's been, but lots to talk about, that's for sure. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Of course, and I'm honored to represent a little part of New Bedford, as well as surrounding Acushnet, Freetown, Westport, as you said, my home, and a little piece of Fall River. So I love being part of the scene in New Bedford, and what a scene it's going on. A lot of good things happening today.
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, love it.
Big thing, obviously, for the legislature over the past, since I know Chris Hendricks was on the last month, but you guys did finally get through the supplemental budget, $3 billion. Took a lot of
We finally did it.
I know the House Republicans were using a tactic to stall it, but in fairness, the Democrats didn't have enough to override it either at the time. There wasn't enough people in the chamber because we are in that point of the legislative session where, one person can say no. Right.
So we all came in a week ago yesterday, and we had enough people in the House, in the chamber, to override what the Republicans were trying to do, and we passed it. And I think everybody was thinking what they had in their mind was the fact that this supplemental budget had the money to finally make good on the raises that we've promised a lot of state workers.
A lot of union workers who had, I guess, negotiated for the
raises. But we hadn't made good on it yet, and people really wanted to get this thing done for Christmas. So we're awful glad that we could get that done.
My understanding, though, I was reading that it might take, for some, they may not get it until the new year, retro.
This is correct. They should start seeing the increase
correct.
As soon as, I think, next week. But so far as getting the retro of it, early January.
So why did it take so long, do you think, to get the bill through? I mean, obviously, I know that we're in informal session, which for those that don't know, there's a formal session, there's informal session, there's different rules and regs, but when you've got a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor, it really shouldn't be that difficult, should it, to get something like this passed?
Yeah. Well, despite having a lot of Democrats in the House and a lot in the Senate, there were some disagreement between the House and the Senate on the portion of the supplemental budget which was going to fund the recent immigrants that we've had.
Right, the shelter.
Yeah.
The shelter provision, which we did put $250 million in. Yeah. Because according to the governor, it was going to run out.
Yeah. Man, this immigrant problem is an issue, real issue, and Jiminy Crickets, it just drives home to me that we've got to control our borders. I mean, I don't think any other nation allows free entry into their country and then is willing to house, feed, and educate whoever comes in. And of course, that's what we're faced with in Massachusetts. We have a lot of people who have come across the border, found their way up north, and here they are in Massachusetts. We have a reputation, I think, in the nation because we've committed to house
anybody can get housing.
Anybody
can be sheltered.
Anybody shelter, yeah.
And that's what I understand for the Republicans, the GOP, at least in this part of the bill. They're saying, okay, if you want the money, you've also got to put in restrictions, or you got to put in some rules and regs for those that are coming in the state.
Yes.
I don't know if that happened though, because the Democrats did break through.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that we don't feel we needed to put in specific restrictions because the governor has already said we're full.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop people from coming up, though.
Well, I guess.
So I guess as what we're saying, I mean, the immigration issue is.
It's a big one.
It's a huge issue.
It's a cushion, and we need Washington to stop, to close the border, and then we need Washington to reimburse us for our costs, which are going to be substantial. So,
well, the other thing too is that the housing crisis for the migrants exacerbated the already housing crisis for those that would necessarily get the shelter provision. Yeah. There's just not enough space now.
Yeah. Gosh, comes back to that issue of housing, doesn't it, Jim?
Well, housing always seems to be a big issue. I don't know we talk about it, it seems, all the time. I just don't know that there seems to be any solution to those things. I mean, the general consensus is, oh, we're going to create housing. Okay. Yeah. But where? I mean, it seems as though the cities, I'm not just saying New Bedford, the cities are sort of tapped out space.
Yeah.
I mean, we can build some things, but not a lot. And the communities, I'm talking rural, the suburbs, they don't want to add more housing to some areas too. So I don't know what necessarily the solution is at this point.
Well, so looking at cities like New Bedford and Fall River, they are going to be encouraged to build more housing next to the coming train stops. Mm-hmm. And that's already started to happen in Fall River. There are a number of units that have been proposed close to where the train will stop in Fall River. And I'm sure, I haven't heard about this specifically in New Bedford, but I'm sure we're going to hear in New Bedford there's going to be more housing units built around the train stop down in the central part of the city, and then certainly up around Kings Highway, where there's actually, when you think about it, there's actually a fair amount of space up there between the old mall that was there, where we always used to go to the movies.
Yep.
And on...
well, the city just announced, well, it wasn't the city, but the Keystone, the former Keystone site in downtown New Bedford is going to be housing if it gets through the permitting process.
Yes, yeah, that's actually a good example.
But the question, though, is what responsibilities do the suburbs have?
Well, they do have a responsibility.
Well, they do, but I mean, you do hear, and I'm generalizing again, that it's more kids in their school, it's more cost to the towns. Mm-hmm. It can't, and you've got the city saying it just can't be us either. There's a responsibility for all the communities to help in this issue, and I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, you're in a unique position because you represent parts of two cities, but I always say you represent two cities,
as well as three rural communities.
So there's got to be a give and take on that issue.
Yeah. Well, I tell you a funny thing about that, Jim. So historically, communities like Westport, Freetown, and Acushnet were very resistant to any sort of new housing. We like it the way it is, but more and more I've been hearing people come to me and they say, Paul, we need more housing in Westport. Housing has gotten so expensive, I don't think my kids will be able to afford it. Or, Paul, I just lost my husband. I can't keep my home up. I need an apartment someplace, but there's only 70 units available in Westport, and there's 600 people on the wait list for those units. So the wait time is 4, 5, 6 years. So people are actually coming and saying now, for the first time, we need more housing.
Yeah, they say it, but what does that mean, though? What does that mean for the communities?
Okay, I'll tell you. For instance, in Westport, Senator Rodrigues and I are trying to bring water and sewer. Well, we already have water. We're trying to bring sewer from Fall River up Route 6, past White's, up to 88 in the first stage, and then maybe to the Dartmouth line in the second stage. What that means is that we'll be able to bring in multi-unit housing, some affordable housing, some market rate housing, some senior housing, and veterans housing, as well as some commercial development. So that's how we in Westport anticipate dealing with it. Yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because it's not just necessarily housing. I mean, you touched upon it. You've got elderly housing, affordable housing, because you can build nice, high-end housing, but the average person from Westport or New Bedford or wherever can't afford those.
No.
And so it's not, again, it's just not, oh, we're going to create housing. Well, it's got to be housing that everybody can afford. Because you're right, because you've got a generation of kids, and I'm talking 25 plus right now, that want to get out of mom's basement, and they can't afford to.
Yep. So I think that you're seeing a change in attitude in the suburbs, in the rural area. Plus, there is this stick that if you are a community that's near a train stop, you are going to be required. So the Acushnets and Westports of this world, which don't have a train stop but are near a train stop, are going to be required to start zoning for multi-family housing. And I was able to I worked with Rep. Strauss to get Acushnet $50,000 to start the planning process, because you need to think it out, and you need to set aside certain areas where you're going to do this. Requires money. So we got them some planning money.
It's interesting too, because you hear that people in a sense are leaving Massachusetts, taxes are high or what have you, but then we seem to have a housing crisis, which is sort of opposite of what you're hearing.
Yeah.
That where are these people coming from? If they're leaving Massachusetts according to the census, where are all these people who are looking for housing coming from?
Yeah. Well, Massachusetts will always be attractive. We've got such a beautiful life, quality of life, particularly along the coasts. New Bedford's a great example. Just wonderful place to live. And we got so many well-educated people. We thank God for UMass Dartmouth. So people will be attracted here. It's just the price of buying a house. And the only antidote to that, and I don't want to see rent control. Rent control is not the long-term answer. The only answer is building more housing units. So I think you're going to see in the remaining 7 months of this current legislature, I think you're going to see some movement towards that. In the tax bill that we passed this fall, we had a big pot of money to encourage market rate housing in communities like New Bedford and Fall River. And yeah, already you've seen a couple of proposals put on the table for Union Street as a result of that money.
Is it important from your standpoint, because of where we live? I mean, you talked about bringing sewer up in Fall River along the highway
in Westport, from Fall River up Westport.
But I'm curious, because I know that you were at the event. I mean, with Buzzards Bay Coalition. I mean, sewer or the services are important because you don't want people to be having their own septic. With Buzzards Bay right around the corner, I know Buzzards Bay saying that that's a huge issue right now.
Yeah.
And like I said, we just had the press conference at the zoo about a month and a half ago, I think. How was that affecting, do you think, not just New Bedford, but the entire southeastern Massachusetts region as far as water quality and the land quality to bring those services to those areas?
Sure. Well, communities like Westport are going to have to do something about all the housing units that are on septic right next to the river or along the ocean.
And they're talking, and it's interesting. I mean, they're talking about that itself. Like at some point, maybe the people who are on septic are going to have to be on sewage.
Yeah.
Because it's unsustainable. But then you're talking about building new houses, and you still need to get those services to the people there.
Yeah, and one of the benefits, by the way, talking about that, Jim, one of the benefits to bringing sewer along Route 6 in Westport is that there's a huge area of housing on very small lots right along the bread and cheese brook that feeds into the Westport River. And bringing sewer their way would take them off their septic systems and would be a major impact to the quality of the water in the Westport River. So,
which is used, has unbelievable use. People are using the Westport River all the time.
Yeah. Gee, I was just driving over Hicksbridge Road a couple of days ago, and I counted 12 skiffs in the water. They were working the natural oyster beds in the Westport River. And you know, I love seeing that because, you know, when I was a kid, I remember something like 200 families made a living on the Westport River.
Yeah. You mentioned UMass Dartmouth. I know we haven't asked you. I'm just curious about your take on the Star Store situation. I know we've had Rep. Markey and Rep. Hendricks talk about it. I'm just looking at your take on it right now.
Yeah, we got to get kids back in the Star Store.
It seems as though, I mean, UMass Dartmouth just doesn't want it for reasons only they know, I guess. Did they handle the situation correctly?
Well, I'm not going to be a Monday morning quarterback, but I did read with interest in the Standard Times last week. Senator Montigny has pointed out that UMass Dartmouth hasn't actually spent the full amount of money we gave it for maintenance on the Star Store.
Right.
So kudos to him for figuring that out. And we want let's not worry about how it happened. Let's get kids back in the Star Store. That's so important to downtown New Bedford. And let's face it, from what I read, the kids aren't getting the same quality of instruction.
No, kids saying that, a lot of people.
What, they're up in the bed and bath store?
And they're not even in there yet, from my understanding. Hasn't even got that. So what can the legislature do from your standpoint? I know others have talked about it, but you need to get the UMass system involved.
Yep. Well, we got the bill, what do they call it? The bully pulpit.
Yeah.
You know, where we, the local delegation, working with Senator Montigny, we're very insistent. We want to see kids back there. Of course, we also have a stick. Budget season begins in January. Oh really? Well, you know, maybe the UMass system could be helpful if it wants to get another increase in funding for the system. So yeah. Hey, ask me about food. Come on, Jim.
Ask me about food. Well, we were talking about groundwater earlier, and I know that you were saying that that's such a huge issue here, especially with the food, that you're chair of the committee.
Yes, of the Ag Committee.
The Ag Committee.
This is the first time agriculture has been on its own. It's always been part of environment, natural resources, and agriculture.
All right.
So, reflecting the fact that the legislature really is concerned about being exposed to other parts of the country that are having their issues, we want to create more of our own food. I'll tell you a funny, interesting story. If you're one of the lucky ones who gets 3 meals a day, and we all know there's too damn many of us that don't get 3 meals a day, but if you do, in the course of a week, 1 meal will have been produced in Massachusetts. So we're currently growing and producing about 5% of what we eat. So that puts us really at a disadvantage when we read, as you and I were talking about, groundwater out in the breadbasket. Iowa, Nebraska has just been depleted, and it'll never come back.
Right.
So they won't be able to continue growing the grains that we need. We got to grow them here.
When we had Mark Schulz in here, he was talking too, and it's interesting too because it's doubtful that you could move the bread basket because of the terrain. But you can certainly grow food. It just may not be the same food as what you're seeing grown out in the Midwest or out in the West. It's an issue that you and I were talking off camera, that the interesting thing is we've said, oh, there's a lot of rain this year. But if you look at the official readings from the airport, the city's still like 5 inches below normal for rain.
And we had a big drought
and it
last
was
year.
over 2 feet last year. So it's like you still haven't made up for the lack of rain, which is, you know, unbelievably important for really everything.
But even with the drought that we had last year and the issues we've had this year, you know, we had an early We had a very early cold snap in February that hurt the apple crop. We had too much rain in September, which hurt the cranberry crop. It's not an easy life being a farmer.
No.
But despite all the problems, we still produce and we can produce much more than we do now.
And food insecurity is still a huge issue in the state and everywhere, really. I mean, there's still too many people, you touched upon it, who are unable to get not just a meal, but a healthy meal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We got to, in local food stores, right now what they offer is Coke and Fritos. And we've got to get local healthy foods into our schools. School meals ought to be healthy, and into our underserved urban areas. By the way, New Bedford's a real leader. Kudos to the New Bedford school system for the work they've done in terms of sourcing locally. They're a real leader in Massachusetts.
Their meals are very healthy,
yes.
too. Very healthy, too.
Yeah, yeah.
And for a lot of those kids, those 2 meals that they get, I know they serve some sort of breakfast, maybe a cereal and a fruit and whatever.
And milk.
Right, and lunch.
Lunch is a good meal.
For those kids, some of those kids, that's it. They get those 2 meals a day, and that's it, which is sad when you think about it.
Yep.
But
and you know that the legislature, we voted this fall to continue those 2 meals a day.
We talked about that the last time.
Yeah, federal money ran out.
Yeah, and the legislature stepped up to say we're going to keep going that because every kid in the state, if you're going to a school, public school, you're getting free meals. I'm curious, do you think the legislature is doing enough to help farmers? Because as you said, it's tough. It's in some ways a thankless job. But do you have enough farmers? I hate to say it, but are there enough farmers to keep it going?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are buying up those properties for other reasons.
Yeah, sure. You know, farmland is normally the best drained, the best most easily built on land in any community. So we need to do a lot of work to make sure that our farmers continue and that we can actually increase farmers. And we're working on it. Yep.
Do you find that farmers, because a lot of farmers are older, are there people that are willing to take their place, stepping up and do it?
Totally. You know, Westport's got a land trust, Westport Land Trust, and it has recently done 6 farms where older farming families decided they want to retire. So the Westport Land Trust buys the farm at the market rate, whatever it's worth, and then puts a conservation restriction on, and then resells it to a young farming family. They've done that 6 times in the past couple of years. And we need to do that. We need to follow that example all around the state. And that's because there's a lot of young people who want to farm, a lot of them. They just don't have access to the land.
Yeah. We got 5 minutes left. I want to touch on a couple of things, sort of tie in together. I know that, and I was talking to you before, you know, this is now, we're heading to the end of 2023, so you guys are sort of in a break right now. 2024 comes up. It is an election year, I know, for the legislative delegation. 2 things. One, it's been said, and you and I were talking about this off camera, the Massachusetts legislature, the least effective legislative body in the entire country as far as passing bills or getting things done. So tying that to what it is, what can we expect in 2024, at least for the first 6 months, other than I mean, obviously the budget has to be done. But what other things, I mean, you talked housing, you want to see housing, but there are other things on the plate that you think have to be done.
Of course, Jim, it's pretty, you know, we're a pretty big target and easy to lob rotten apples at us. On the other hand, you look at Massachusetts' record, we lead the nation in taking care of our veterans. No other state does as much as we do. The red flag law, you talk about the issue with gun violence and all. We were one of the leaders, Massachusetts and California, in instituting the red flag laws, which allow somebody to say, you know, my nephew is really acting strange. I don't think he should have access to his gun collection. really important red flags.
So it's not about the amount, it's about the quality of the bills.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we should be judged on the number of bills we passed. So what will we be doing in the final?
You said to me economic development was going to be something that comes through.
Yes.
What does that look like right now that you see?
Well, I think economic development is all about building our workforce. We still keep hearing that employers say we need more people. And these days what they're really saying is we need more educated, trained people. So I think you're going to see us really working on developing our workforce, which actually starts in the high school. We need to, in high school, start doing more career paths. You know, kind of like the way Volk schools have done it.
Yeah.
That has to be done in the
New Bedford, I know, has,
school.
and you know better than I, New Bedford has some different curriculums for different sort of vocational skill sets.
Yeah.
But it's not a vocational school, so there's...
There's certain restrictions which we need to loosen up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will. That'll be part of economic development.
Is housing something that you think can be addressed in the next, and I'm just saying 6-7 months right now? Is there anything housing-wise you think can be pushed through the legislature?
Well, you know, I frankly think we've already got the tools. We were just talking earlier about the requirement for multifamily housing around train stops. That is in the law. That is part of what we've done. And you're starting to see more communities. I just read in the newspaper today, Milton finally allowed multifamily housing. They've been, like all the suburbs around Boston, no, 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 we don't want it. Well, they're required to. And if they hadn't have done it by the end of the year, there would have been certain restrictions on them, you know, the stick. So they finally said yes. And I think you're going to see these two developments on Union Street that have been announced in the past couple of weeks. I think those are just the start of prospects that you're going to see in New Bedford. And New Bedford is probably typical of what you're going to see in Fall River and Worcester, Lawrence, Lowell.
Anything for you from your point? Any priorities for you locally that you want to see pass through in the next 6-7 months?
Well, I'm really working, looking at my view as the leader in agriculture in the legislature. We're going to be working on a bunch of bills which are going to support our farmers, guarantee that we'll have the farmland that we need in the future, and develop our ability to produce food from the crops that we grow. So
we're out of time. It's good seeing you. Thanks for coming in. Wish you and your family a happy holiday season. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we wish everybody out there a wonderful season, and God bless. On to 2024.
Exactly. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.